going on, everyone? So Andre Drummond used to be an absolute force. I mean, this guy was easily a 20 and 10 guy, made an argument for the best center in the entire league at one point, and since then has basically just evolved into a backup center and still is one of, if not the best backup centers in the entire league. He's actually very good for a backup center. He's given you basically 6-6 for the Chicago Bulls as a backup center, and he only played 12 minutes per game. So he's basically giving you, a point and a rebound every 2 minutes. Like, that's really good, really solid for, just a backup big man who only plays 12 minutes. He is a guy that I do believe in the proper role on the proper team. I do believe that he's easily a double-double guy, definitely in rebounds. And I just think he needs to find the right opportunity. It's also crazy that he's only 30 years old still, right? Feels like he's been in the league a lot longer. Solid size, good defense, 6'10", 279 pounds, and just a guy that can really hold his own, right? This is a guy that basically averages 2 blocks per game, just shy 1.9. And he is really only a backup because he needed that humbling, right? He thought he was the guy. He had locker room issues. He said it himself. He was at his camp, had a whole speech with his camp kids and said, you when you're not a part of the team, like, I threw away the bag. I thought I was this guy. And, it took a little bit of humbling. And he's not the first one to go through this. We've seen plenty of guys kind of need that piece of humbleness. But I do, again, in the right situation, believe that he could still be a force for several teams. He doesn't really provide floor spacing, so he's not really a modern big man, right? Andre Drummond kind of aged, not in the sense of like age, but like aged poorly with the times, right? Now it's all about the floor spacing big. It's all about the big that, can knock down the three and, operate in the mid-range if need be. Where Andre Drummond is basically looking at lobs, putbacks, little hook, 10, 5 feet, little hook shots, things like that. But Andre Drummond has recently talked about him being a Hall of Famer, that he believes that, his resume basically shows that he's a Hall of Famer. And he also said that he's a guy that is the best rebounder ever, right? He believes he is the best rebounder. Now, the question is what he's saying facts, or is it just total nonsense? Let's start with the rebounding. He was a 4-time rebounding champion. He, for his career, averages just under 13 rebounds per game. He's 12.7 rebounds per game. He absolutely is up there, and you can make an argument for in the conversation as far as rebounding goes. Especially Detroit Pistons, Andre Drummond, like, that dude was like 20 rebounds every other game type of rebounder. He was insane that he was able to do that on just such a frequent basis. I mean, this is a guy that literally has countless seasons in which he averaged 15 to 16 rebounds per game. He had a stretch between 2014 and 2019, so basically a 5-year stretch, where he averaged basically 15 and a half rebounds per game that season. In 2017 and 2018, he averaged 16 rebounds. He was averaging 5 offensive rebounds that year, and then followed that up with a 15.6 rebound season and was putting up 5.4 rebounds, offensive rebounds per game. He is definitely in the conversation and in the argument for one of the best rebounders ever, right? But what about Hall of Fame? Now, the criteria and standard for the Hall of Fame kind of feels like it varies at times, right? Like, sometimes it's like, is it stats? Is it success? Like, what is the criteria? And many people have kind of, talked about how the NBA and the Basketball Hall of Fame is not that difficult to get into. So with that, Andre Drummond absolutely could be a guy that gets into the Hall of Fame. Stats wise, there's a real argument. Again, this is a guy that is a career 13.2 points, 12.7 rebounds. This is basically a 13 and 13 guy. There are not very many 13 and 13 guys in the history of the NBA. This is also a guy that averaged 2 blocks per game, just under 2 assists per game. Like, his stats, you can make a real argument for. 4-time rebounding champion, 2-time All-Star, 1-time All-NBA, 2013 or 2012, 2013 All-Rookie team. Those are the big highlights of his career from a stat side. Now, the problem is he's 30 years old and he's already in a backup role, and is he going to, when all is said and done, like, can he if he could get a starting role on the right team and get back to being basically like a 12 and 12 guy or something like that, and kind of like maintain that, I do think that, right, there would be this continued argument. My problem is that if he just remains in a backup role and just kind of, plays that type of role for the rest of his career, which isn't a bad thing. Again, he's arguably the best backup center in the league, but I feel like he's a guy that's going to be a forgotten memory, right? I think he's a guy that it kind of is an afterthought, to where I don't think he has a real shot of getting into the Hall of Fame. He hasn't really won anything, right? Where if he went to, if his stint with the Lakers worked out, right? Because the Lakers, their biggest problem became injuries, right? Like, they were already injury riddled. You had Anthony Davis go down, and LeBron James was basically on one leg. Dennis Schroeder was just not the same player after he got COVID and came back and returned from COVID. And there was a lot of questions about the respiratory issues and stuff like that. And the reason I say the Lakers is because that was the most likely shot so far of him winning an NBA championship, right? Like, he was in the playoffs. He was at that point coming off a buyout, which people were shocked that the Lakers were able to acquire him. He played 25 minutes a game for the Lakers, averaged 12 points and 10 rebounds. He also averaged 2 assists and just under a block, 1.2 blocks. So his stats were nice. He was a real key contributor, right? I just felt like the time to figure it out wasn't really working. His mental, I don't think, was in the right place, right? He's talked about that. And I think that all of those injuries, if the Lakers were healthy, I think very likely could have won the championship, which at that time they would have went back-to-back. They were up 2-1 against the Phoenix Suns. They looked like they were going to run away with it and go up 3-1. They had no answer for Anthony Davis. It looked like the Lakers were too big and too much for them to handle. And then Anthony Davis goes down, and they just didn't have enough. But prior to that, they were, before all the injuries, even during the season, they were the number 1 team in the league. They had best defensive rating, like everything you need to win it. Like, all of the same stats from 2020 were essentially the same thing. You had Dennis Schroeder, Anthony Davis, and LeBron James were plus 15.5, which was far and away number 1 in the league for best 3-man units. So you had basically the best 3-man unit, the best defense, a good, good enough offense, and was number 1 in basically everything. And then all the injuries happened. Dennis Schroeder got COVID, and then they were basically hobbled going in there, and they ended up losing, right? Where I think if Andre Drummond would have been a part of that team and they would have won, I think that there would be a different conversation than what there is right now. I think you could make an argument that it'd be no doubt that he was a Hall of Famer, that he was that guy, right? Where, you look at guys and some of these centers over the years and stuff, like, everything about him is comparable. Like, to the eye test, he's ridiculous, right? Like he stands out. But the problem is that he never led a team like Dwight Howard, right? Like if you match up Dwight Howard and Andre Drummond, they're not that far off. Dwight has the Defensive Player of the Year accolades and stuff like that, but like they were both very dominant forces. The problem is that Dwight was undoubtedly a number one guy and led a team to the finals, right? And then ultimately ended up winning an NBA championship as a key cog for the Lakers. He wasn't Orlando Dwight Howard at that time or the first stint with the Lakers Dwight Howard at that time, but he was still a very important piece, right? Like the Lakers probably don't win that without him, especially with what he was able to do to Jokic and stuff like that. Like he had his impact, right? And that's what I mean by Andre Drummond, right? He has never really won anything, never really led a team anywhere. And on top of that, if he would have been a key cog and won a championship, or like with Brooklyn or whatever, right? Like if he would have been a key cog and would have won, then I think that there would have been more of an argument just like Dwight Howard, right? But even Dwight, he's gotten his criticism, he's gotten his lack of recognition, right? So it becomes one of those things where it's like if Dwight is an odd man out, then so is Andre Drummond. But I do think that there is an argument for Andre Drummond. Like, I don't think it's delusional. I think it's not super likely, the way I'll put it, right? I don't think it's very likely he's going to get in, but unless if he goes the right situation, like I said, if he goes to a team, I'm trying to think of a team that could really use a center that like would make sense that he might be able to start with. We could stick with the Lakers, right? Like the Lakers, they are looking for another center. They want another center. Anthony Davis wants to go back to the power forward position. Like if he could go back to the Lakers and actually earn the starting job, and the Lakers win a championship, and he's like the starting center and giving you 12 and 12 a game, or like 10 and 12 a game, and is like a real huge factor, then I think you could start making the conversation. Because he's still young enough to where, like, this is a guy, like, he could still be effective for another, like, 4 to 5 years easy. Right? So if he goes to the right situation and can have that impact for 4 or 5 years, then I think he'd be great. And I think that he's still young enough to continue to make a bid for it. But anyway, as always, this is a discussion, so I pass the question on you. Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. What do you think? Do you think he's delusional? Do you think that, no, like, he has a shot, right? However you feel, whatever your thoughts are.